Trump told reporters on board Air Force One en route to Florida that something should happen with President Bashar al-Assad, but stopped short of calling on Assad to leave office.
I think what happened in Syria is a disgrace to humanity, and he's there, and I guess he's running things, so something should happen.
My fellow Americans, on Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched.
The US has launched a military strike on a Syrian government airbase. The Pentagon says 59 Tomahawk cruise missiles were fired from 2 warships in the eastern Mediterranean. Their target was the airfield from which the US says the Assad regime launched a poison gas attack on a rebel-held town this week that killed dozens of civilians, including many children. A UK-based monitoring group said the missiles had almost completely destroyed the base near Homs city and killed 4 soldiers. This is the toughest direct US action yet in Syria's civil war, raising the risk of confrontation with Russia and Iran, the Assad regime's 2 main military backers.
There is no doubt in our minds, and the information we have supports, that Syria, the Syrian regime under the leadership of President Bashar al-Assad are responsible for this attack. And I think further it is very important that the Russian government consider carefully their continued support for the Assad regime.
The governor of Homs says the US missile attack on an airbase near the western Syrian city was to serve the goals of terrorism. Syrian leadership and Syrian policy will not change, Talal Barazi told state television in a phone interview. He added, "This targeting was not the first, and I don't believe it will be the last." He said military positions were targeted in Syria and in Homs specifically in order to publicly serve the goals of terrorism in Syria and the goals of Israel in the long run.
Today, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad accused Israel of trying to topple his embattled government, claiming that the Free Syrian Army is in fact fighting on behalf of the Jewish state. Assad was quoted as saying, quote, "Even if they're not a regular Israeli army, they are still fighting for Israel," end quote. The Israeli government has denied providing any sort of military intervention. However, in 2015, former Defense Minister Moshe Ya'alon revealed that Israel had been providing humanitarian aid to various factions of the Free Syrian Army. In related news, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said that he was 100% certain that Assad was directly responsible for the chemical attack in Idlib, killing over 80 people, including at least 20 children.
Israel is praising the United States for executing a major power move in Syria by striking a government airfield overnight to protest the recent chemical attack. The Israeli Defense Force was notified of the planned attack just ahead of the strike, which took place at around 4 in the morning. Israeli leaders across the political spectrum are uniting to praise the American move, including Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and opposition leader Isaac Herzog. Netanyahu has released a statement saying that, quote, "President Trump sent a strong and clear message today that the use and spread of chemical weapons will not be tolerated." In fact, several Israeli leaders even urged Trump to take action to stop the horror, including the Israeli Justice and Defense ministers who say chemical attacks have strategic connotations for Israel. Just after the strike, U.S. President Trump sent out yet another message urging all civilized nations to work to end the bloodshed in Syria.
Now the Russian president has condemned, quote, unfounded accusations against the Syrian government following the recent suspected chemical attack in the Arab nation. In a phone conversation with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Vladimir Putin underlined that these accusations are unacceptable.
Today, Russia's foreign ministry has announced that it recognizes West Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This makes Russia the first country in the world to recognize any part of Jerusalem as the Jewish state's capital. The statement, issued by the Russian Foreign Ministry, reads, quote, "We reaffirm our commitment to the UN-approved principles of the Palestinian-Israeli settlement, which includes the status of East Jerusalem as the capital of the future Palestinian state. At the same time, we must state that in this context, we view West Jerusalem as the capital of Israel." End quote. In the coming days, Russia's ambassador to Israel, Alexander Schein, will meet with foreign ministry officials to discuss the ramifications of Moscow's decision. As of yet, Russia has announced that it has no plans to relocate its embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. One Israeli diplomat told the Jerusalem Post that the move may be a ploy to distract Israel from Moscow's culpability in the Syrian chemical attack that left over 80 dead, including at least 20 children. Much of the international community, including the United States and Israel, believe that the attack had been ordered by Moscow's ally, embattled Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. However, despite the widespread condemnation of Assad's actions, the Kremlin remains firm in supporting its ally.
An Hamas military commander is being hit by the United States with terrorism sanctions. According to the State Department, Abu Anas al-Gandour is being designated as a global terrorist. The designation freezes any assets in the United States. It bars Americans from doing business with him. Hamas is the Islamic militant group that rules the Gaza Strip. According to the U.S., Hamas is a terrorist organization. Gandour leads a Hamas brigade in northern Gaza. He spent 5 years in Israeli prison decades ago. The U.S. says he was involved in an attack on an Israeli military outpost on the Israel-Gaza border that killed 2 Israeli soldiers.
All right, and yet another sign of the deep military cooperation with the United States. Israel has just hosted a high-level training drill for elite commandos from both nations. The objective of the joint exercise is to further the development of operational capabilities between the two countries' special forces. The Israeli Shayete 13 Navy commandos conducted the drill with their counterparts in the U.S. Navy SEALs. Israel's Sa'al 5 missile ship also participated. The field collaboration training was geared at preparation for a full variety of potential scenarios, ranging from the boarding and overtaking of ships to parachuting at sea. The head of Israel's naval operations says the annual exercise is essential for exchanging knowledge and forging professional relations.
Now, all of this is happening as the president prepares for his first meeting with the leader of China.
We begin with a 2-day summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping. The meeting between the leaders of the world's 2 superpowers will spotlight major issues such as trade and North Korea. It's being closely watched around the world.
Donald Trump entertains Chinese President Xi Jinping at his unofficial residence of Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach. It's a world where Trump feels more comfortable, and the 2 men will attempt to develop a relationship with wide-ranging consequences. Top of the list, North Korea and its repeated missile tests. Pyongyang has recently fired off another ballistic missile following on from September's nuclear test. The international community retaliated with yet more sanctions. Trump wants the Chinese to do more to rein in the Kim Jong-un regime. Trump took to Twitter, "North Korea is behaving very badly. They've been playing the US for years, and China has done little to help." Washington wants Beijing to implement UN sanctions. However, the Chinese say that would devastate North Korea's economy and the population, as 90% of North Korea's exports go to China, the main source of foreign exchange for Pyongyang. Next on the agenda, the THAAD anti-missile shield in South Korea. China is unhappy about the deployment of the THAAD anti-missile shield in South Korea. The Chinese see it as a threat in its own backyard. The US believes the system will discourage North Korea from attacking its neighbour. The South China Sea dispute. China lays claim to almost all of the South China Sea. Beijing is at work enlarging islands, some of which could host armaments. The Trump administration has yet to determine a policy on this. Obama deployed warships and aircraft to monitor the situation. Trade is trouble for Trump, and during his campaign, he slammed China for its currency manipulation to favour exports and threatened to slap massive tariffs on China if the US fails to get adequate access to the Chinese market. He tweeted, "The meeting next week with China will be a very difficult one in that we can no longer have massive trade deficits."
Had a long discussion already, and so far I have gotten nothing, absolutely nothing. But we have developed a friendship, I can see that, and I think long term we're going to have a very, very great relationship, and I look very much forward to it.
A Chinese fighter plane has been spotted on a Chinese-held island in the South China Sea. The first such deployment seen this year, a US think tank reported on Thursday. The Asian Maritime Transparency Initiative, or AMTI, part of Washington's Center for Strategic and International Studies, said the J-11 fighter was visible in a satellite image taken on March 29th of Woody Island in the Paracel Island chain. News of the deployment came as US President Donald Trump was due to hold his first meetings with China's President Xi Jinping in Florida on Thursday and Friday, at which he is expected to air US concerns about China's pursuit of territory and militarization of outposts in the South China Sea. The United States has said in the past that deployments of Chinese fighter jets to Woody Island were part of a disturbing trend of militarization that raised questions about Beijing's intentions in the South China Sea, which is an important trade route.
Now, the highly controversial leader of the Philippines has ordered troops to occupy uninhabited islands and reefs. The country claims in the disputed South China Sea this move is expected to anger Beijing, which claims almost all of the territory and has been building artificial islands in the area. For more on this and other news in East Asia, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So, Adam, this is a bold move by Rodrigo Duterte, especially after relations between the Philippines and China seem to be improving.
That's right, Mark. Duterte has once joked during his campaign that he would jet ski to one of China's artificial islands to assert Manila's claim to the region. But after taking office, he has tried to mend the strained ties with Beijing in recent months. During his visit to China, his rhetoric was very anti-US and pro-Beijing. He's even previously said he would set aside a ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration that ruled in favor of the Philippines' claims against China's so-called 9-dash line in order for closer bilateral ties. But Thursday's order to send his troops to occupy uninhabited islands will likely anger China, and his efforts for closer ties will face hurdles. Duterte also said he might visit the Philippine-controlled island of Thitu to raise the national flag there on the country's Independence Day, which falls on June 12th. Speaking to reporters during a visit to a military base in Palawan, which is near the disputed waters, Duterte said everyone was making a grab for the islands, so his country should live there to claim what's already theirs. Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam and Taiwan also claim sovereignty in the strategic area.
An American citizen was arrested in Canada on Thursday after airport officials allegedly found a fake bomb in his suitcase, Reuters reports. According to the Toronto Star, 58-year-old Joseph Galasco was charged with mischief and has a hearing Friday. The mock improvised explosive device was discovered during a screening of luggage on a United Airlines flight from Toronto to Chicago. The flight was delayed and passengers were removed from the plane and moved to an isolation area for re-screening.
Be prepared for possible delays if you're planning to travel in or out of Europe's Schengen zone. Stricter checks are being brought in from Friday along the external borders, something the EU says is needed to fight terrorism and boost security.
One of the issues that came to light with recent attacks has been the phenomenon of foreign fighters, so people with EU passports who are not normally checked systematically against every security database at national and European level, and now they will be.
But those systematic checks can be reduced to targeted ones if long queues build up at a land or sea border and there's no risks to security. There'll also be a transitional period at airports. The stricter controls come in the wake of deadly terrorist attacks on European soil, including those in Paris, Nice and Brussels.
If you empower women so they can, like a man, choose when and with whom to have a family, make those choices, empower them.
Justin Trudeau believes the best way to help women succeed is to empower them. The Canadian Prime Minister discussed women's rights during a recent interview and called upon men to do their part. According to website The Daily Beast, while appearing at the annual Women in the World Summit this week, Trudeau made it clear that the public can't just talk about how to best make sure women are on an equal playing field, but rather take action to ensure this happens. During the interview, he also stated the importance of appointing women leaders in government.
Protesters in Argentina have clashed with police during demonstrations against government austerity measures. Security forces used high-powered water cannon and tear gas to control picketers who had blocked the Pan American Highway in Buenos Aires. The violence erupted during a general strike, the first since President Mauricio Macri took office 16 months ago. Macri will open the World Economic Forum and economists from around the world will come, this left-wing politician said. They are all neoliberal. There will also be business leaders who will come to discuss how to continue stealing the riches of our people, how to continue with plans to exclude one section of society so as to enrich the same old ones. Away from the clashes in industrial action, Macri was addressing the World Economic Forum in Argentina's capital. Mocking those who decided to walk off the job, he said, "Good morning, welcome everyone. It is great that today we are here working." The one-day strike action over cuts to government spending and rising prices saw transport services grind to a halt. Factory workers, teachers and other public sector employees also took part in the walkout.
In the throes of a social and economic crisis, Venezuela has once again seen nationwide protests against President Nicolas Maduro's socialist government. Dozens of activists clashed with security forces who were blocking one march in Caracas. The latest wave of rallies followed the Supreme Court's widely condemned move to take over the opposition-led Congress. The pro-Maduro body later revoked its decision, but that didn't stop thousands from protesting against what they label a lurch toward dictatorship. The embattled leader does still have some support, as this counter-rally in the capital appears to show. Maduro's government claims a US-backed business elite is responsible for the economic downturn and subsequent triple-digit inflation and shortages of basic food and medical supplies.
The Argiro family is on the front line of Greece's debt crisis. Austerity in government has meant austerity at home.
We use light bulbs that are 5 watt or 2 watt. We're close to going blind. We turn on the water heater for 5 minutes so that the bill doesn't get too high. We teach our children to adapt to the system, not to ask for things that the other kids have. Right now, we can't buy it.
With a scarcity of work, bills are piling up. And they're not alone. More than 40% of Greeks are now behind on their utility bills, higher than anywhere else in Europe.
When you live off very little money, you can't pay the bills. That's the main thing. People will make sure you don't starve, but you can't pay the bills.
Neither can the government. Since 2010, it's had 3 multi-billion-dollar bailouts to stave off bankruptcy. Its next one could be agreed on Friday in exchange for more government cuts, including pensions, which many households rely on.
To the showdown over the Supreme Court tonight and to that historic move in the Senate. Republicans triggering the so-called nuclear option. That sets up a vote tomorrow now to confirm Supreme Court nominee Neil Gorsuch. By a simple majority, Republicans won't need any votes from Democrats.
The Republican leader today emerged from the partisan battlefield with a thumbs up. The top Democrat, his head hung low in defeat. Left behind the casualties, a Senate and a Supreme Court fundamentally altered.
The ayes are 48. The nays are 52.
With Democrats blocking the president's nominee Neil Gorsuch, Republicans making a controversial play, changing the Senate rules to confirm Supreme Court nominees from now on with a simple majority vote, lowering the threshold from 60 votes to just 51. A move so drastic, it's known as the nuclear option. For 2 days, Democrats put up a fight on the floor, one senator talking for 15 hours straight.
This is an extreme nominee from the far right.
This morning, they had the votes to block Gorsuch, but Republicans were prepared to go nuclear.
Certainly, I think the step is warranted.
A bill that aims to protect religious expression in Florida's public schools passed the state's House of Representatives. Lawmakers were hugging and applauding after the bill passed, and many see it as a win for religious freedom. House Bill 303 allows students and staff in the state's public schools to participate in student-led prayer. It also bars school districts from discriminating against students, parents, and school personnel on the basis of religious expression. The measure is in response to the tightening of free speech rights in schools, including the banning of religious jewelry like cross necklaces. Charges against a Christian student at Florida's Rollins College have been dropped. An Orange County, Florida 9th Circuit Court clerk confirmed to CBN News that a judge dismissed the case after the professor voluntarily dropped her charge against the student. Muslim professor Arij Zufari had an injunction against student Marshall Polston after they were at odds over alleged anti-Christian comments she made. He told CBN News in an earlier interview that he is concerned about her alleged ideology and connections.
This professor has radical ties and radical links. And of course, there's a campaign now to get this professor removed from Rollins and hopefully other academic institutions if she's going to continue with this agenda, which is really an agenda of indoctrination.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions has directed federal prosecutors to reevaluate marijuana enforcement. Carter Evans reports it could lead to a federal crackdown on legal weed.
All right, so what have we got in here?
This is Super Lemon Haze.
Each year, more than 100,000 marijuana plants are grown, processed, and packaged in this industrial warehouse in Olympia, Washington. And it's all legal.
A lot of people would be surprised to see what a good recreational facility looks like.
Jerry Daraviani is with Northwest Cannabis Solutions, the state's leading pot producer, earning $21 million last year.
I think that a lot of politicians have realized that even if they don't personally like marijuana, that this is the better way forward.
They'd rather have it in a place like this than in back alleys and garages.
Absolutely.
In 2012, Washington became one of the first of 8 states and the District of Columbia to legalize recreational marijuana. It's now a $2 billion business that's raked in $500 million in taxes. But the federal government still puts cannabis in the same category as heroin. And in a departure from the Obama administration, more aggressive enforcement may be coming. Attorney General Jeff Sessions.
I reject the idea that we're going to be better placed if we have more marijuana and you can just go down to the corner grocery store and get it.
Do you think it's a situation where you could see federal raids here on some of your state legal operations?
That would be deeply troubling.
Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson has already fought President Trump's travel ban and won.
So you're prepared to go toe-to-toe with the Trump administration?
That's an understatement. The Trump administration should respect what states are doing. We're the laboratories of democracy.
But if this multi-state experiment is not accepted at a federal level, the budding marijuana business could soon take a hit.
A mother visiting her child's grave got a visitor of her own.
Hello. You're beautiful.
Marie Robinson of England lost her son Jack to brain cancer 4 years ago. She went to his grave on the anniversary of his death to sit with him for a while, when she says this red robin came to keep her company. It didn't seem to be afraid at all, landing on her foot and even perching on her fingers when she called it as it watched over her from a nearby grave.
You're so sweet.
The grieving mother was brought to tears by the beautiful moment, which she is taking as a sign of love from her late son.